Hello and welcome to Knowledge to Nourish. My name is Kat Francis. I'm a registered dietitian with Legacy Health.
And my name is Emily Campbell, and I'm also a dietitian at Legacy Health.
And today we're going to be talking about food, mood, and the gut microbiome. So let's get started with this.
Yeah. So I don't think it's a big surprise. We all know that food impacts our moods in a lot of different ways. The relationship between food and mood is complex, though, and it can vary depending not only on what we're eating, but also time of day that we're eating, amount of food that we're eating, and just the general age and health of the person who's doing the eating. So, today we're going to discuss some of the more direct ways that food impacts our mood.
So let's start with number one. The first bullet on our slide is sugar and refined carbohydrates. These foods are metabolized very quickly, and soon after eating them, we can get a surge in energy. That's our blood sugar going up, and our mood may even feel elevated. But unfortunately, this is often followed by a crash. Sometimes our blood sugar can then drop below baseline, causing a more drastic low and other physical and emotional symptoms like shaking, anxiety, and sadness. And then we often go and seek that surge again, which leads to wanting more sugar and refined carbohydrates. This can very easily become a vicious cycle.
Yeah. And Kat, you bring up kind of the more immediate response to these foods, but what we're going to also talk about a little bit later in this webinar is that these foods are likely also having impacts further downstream, so in our gut, and that can cause a whole other slew of mood disturbances. But like I said, we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
So, another immediate impact from food is with caffeine. So, caffeine is a stimulant drug that many of us take in just as our daily routine. And while in moderation, coffee and tea can have some health benefits, too much can cause issues with sleep and increased anxiety. We can also become dependent on caffeine, find ourselves needing more, and then if we miss our daily dose, we may notice irritability and even headaches. Some people are more sensitive to the effects of caffeine.
Right. And kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum is the depressants. So alcohol is, one of the most common depressants. And what that means is that it's slowing down our brain activity, which initially, might be a good thing because it can help us feel relaxed. But unfortunately, it can also worsen symptoms of depression. And drinking alcohol close to bedtime can also decrease the quality of our sleep, which then leads us to waking up in the morning feeling groggy and not at all refreshed, which can turn us back into that cycle of reaching for the stimulant.
Right. Alcohol also decreases our absorption of thiamine, which is an important B vitamin for our brain function. And it may also kill off some of those healthy bacteria in our guts that have more detrimental effects downstream.
All right. So not only what we eat, but impacts our mood, but also kind of how often or our pattern of eating is also going to have an impact on that. So going long periods of time without eating can cause our blood sugars to start to drop. And if you've ever experienced a low blood sugar, you'll know that that can lead you to feeling tired, sort of like you just want to go lay down on the couch. And it can also lead to feelings of irritability or being a little irrational. Um, Skipping meals, and particularly breakfast, can also increase cortisol in our body, which is our stress hormone, and it's responsible for triggering a stress response in the body.
Yeah, I know for me, if I skip meals or I don't get balanced nutrition during the day, I can often chase my hunger later in the day. And this leads to less healthy choices, eating too fast or eating too much. And overeating to the point of feeling uncomfortable just makes you feel tired and lethargic. You got to lay down on the couch again. Eating more moderate sized meals on a consistent schedule can really help maintain steady blood sugar levels and result in a more even mood, which ultimately gives us more space to make those healthy choices later in the day.
Absolutely. And water is also going to play a big part of this. So, a huge percentage, 70% of our brain is made up of water. So, it totally makes sense to me that being dehydrated and not getting enough water is going to compromise how we're feeling. Different bodies need different amounts of fluid. There isn't, a one size fits all for every person. But just as a general rule of thumb, I usually recommend aiming for about 2 liters of fluid a day, mainly from water. And then that will help you avoid headaches. It can help you stay, focused and concentrated. Um, and it can also help mood.
Right. So, here we've talked about a lot of examples of how our choices and our timing with our nutrition can more immediately impact our mood, but that can't be the whole story, right?
Never. It's never the whole story. There's always more to the nutrition story. And as you'll see on the next slide, there are several pathways in which diet impacts our mental health. And so much so that there's actually a new field of science you'll see there on that first bullet called nutritional psychiatry. And this is dedicated at looking at that relationship between our brain and our diet. And through these studies, what we're finding is that we can potentially change our minds by changing our diet, which is fascinating.
Yes, this kind of thing makes me so excited, Emily. So, a lot of people are probably wondering if there's one way of eating that is best for our mental health. Of course, nutrition always needs to be tailored to the individual, but there are some common characteristics across the diets that have been studied in this field. So, as always, eating more fruits and vegetables and limiting those sugars and processed foods are important. Fruits and vegetables are full of antioxidants, which reduce the stress and damage that can occur to our brains and other parts of our body just through the normal daily activities and environmental exposures. And also, remember that fat makes up over 50% of our brain tissue. So, the types of fats that we eat can play a big role in our mental health. Fat is an important driver of pro-inflammatory, those are inflammatory, things that cause inflammation in our bodies, and anti-inflammatory pathways in our bodies. So when we eat the fats that drive our anti-inflammatory pathways, we can reduce the inflammation in our bodies and including in our brains. So these fats include the polyunsaturated fats that are found in cold water fatty fish like Alaskan salmon, as well as nuts like walnuts and seeds like hemp and chia.
Yeah, a lot of what you're describing sounds to me like the Mediterranean diet, which you can see there on that third bullet is going to be rich in those polyunsaturated fats, fiber, fruits, and vegetables. So, if someone was interested in exploring more ways to eat fruits and vegetables and healthy fats, Mediterranean diet resources is definitely where I would get started. And I'll also point you to another one of our YouTube webinars on heart health, which is also going to give a deeper dive into healthy fat choices.
Excellent. Yeah, the Mediterranean diet is probably one of the most well-studied dietary patterns, and it emphasizes a lot of these foods we're talking about. And I find that the Mediterranean diet is pretty approachable for most people.
All right, so next we want to talk about One of our favorite ways in which diet impacts our health, and that is through our gut. The more we learn about the gut, the more we see how the health of the gut affects our entire body, including the brain. And the brain, excuse me, so the connection between the two is often referred to as the gut brain connection.
So, one of the ways we know the gut and brain are connected are through something called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the largest cranial nerve in the body, and it's the main component of the parasympathetic nervous system. This is also known as our rest and digest branch of our autonomic nervous system. It oversees a lot of different bodily functions, including our mood, our response, digestion, and heart rate. And there's evidence that vagus nerve stimulation is a promising treatment for depression, post traumatic stress disorder, and inflammatory bowel disease. How well our vagus nerve is working is known as vagal tone. And while most of the studies to date have looked at electrical stimulus of the vagus nerve, we may be able to improve our vagal tone through lifestyle modifications, healthy eating, and through practicing breathing exercises.
Yeah. So just to kind of give, a real life example of this gut brain connection, you can kind of think about if you've ever been nervous for something and how do you feel that in your body? Oftentimes we have butterflies in our stomach. So that's just an example of how our gut and our brain are connected in real life. We do know that the vagus nerve is the largest cranial nerve in the body, so it's obviously important. But I want to draw attention also to the much smaller structures in our body that we're learning have um, even more impact on this gut brain connection. And so let's start with the neurons. Neurons are the cells or the fundamental units of our nervous system. The enteric nervous system is a collection of neurons found in the intestines, and they can function independently of the central nervous system. And this has been termed the brain of the gut, or some people might say the second brain. This system is responsible for how food moves through our intestines, what chemicals are released in the intestine, the blood flow through the wall of the gut, and regulation of immune and inflammatory reactions in our intestines.
Wow, there's a lot going on down there. And I would say one of the things that surprised me the most when learning about the gut brain connections were that several of our neurotransmitters, those are brain chemicals that communicate information throughout our brain and body, are made in the gut. Dopamine and serotonin are two neurotransmitters that affect mood, sleep, concentration, our weight, carbohydrate cravings, and addictions. And they can contribute to depression, pain, anxiety, insomnia when they're out of balance. More than 50% of dopamine and 95% of serotonin in the body are located in the gut. Another neurotransmitter called GABA for short is also active in the gut and has a complex relationship with our gut microbiome.
Right. So, if you're not familiar with that term, our gut microbiome is the collection of trillions of bacteria that live in our gut. These are tiny organisms that naturally live in our intestines and turns out play a really big role in our health. So, the gut microbiome is a really hot research topic right now. I feel like every time I look into this, I learn something new that's just come out. But what we do know so far is that the amount of friendly or good bacteria that a person has in their gut plays a role in how much GABA, which is that anti anxiety neurotransmitter, is made.
So, Having a healthy balance of bacteria in our gut can really change how we feel mentally and even how we crave foods. Because some unhealthy bacteria thrive on sugars. So when our gut microbiome is out of balance, we may notice that we have more cravings for sugar. Those little guys are literally telling us to eat sugar to feed them. But eating complex carbohydrates that are rich in fiber actually can help fuel the healthy bacteria, leading to more production of those feel good neurotransmitters as well as anti inflammatory chemicals.
Yes, we definitely want to try to eat in a way that promotes balance in the gut microbiome. And we'll talk more specifics on that next. Um, if there is an imbalance in the gut bacteria, that's often referred to as dysbiosis. And not only does that affect the neurotransmitter release, like Kat mentioned, but it can also lead to damage of the intestinal wall. This is because we have immune cells in our gut that mount an inflammatory response to some of the chemicals that unhealthy bacteria are making. The intestinal wall, the gut barrier, it's a gatekeeper to our body. And when our digestive health is compromised, the cells in the lining of the gut can shrink, and that can allow unwanted materials to pass through, which then can activate an immune response and inflammatory chemicals throughout our body. When the gut wall is not intact, we also can't properly absorb nutrients. So, this vicious cycle is often referred to as leaky gut, if you've ever seen that.
Yeah, a lot of unwanted things coming in and the things that we really need are not making their way in the right place. So I just want to kind of summarize because we are barely skimming the surface of this topic, but we did just give a lot of information. So this slide sort of is a brief overview of various ways in which our brains and our guts are connected. And really, the take home message here is that digestive health does play a role in our mental health. So, if we're looking at improving our mental health, we may want to start by attending to our gut, eating healthier foods to support our gut health. So, how does this translate into what foods we should eat and what foods we should avoid?
Well, let's start with the good news, the foods that we should definitely eat to help our gut health. And let's just start with this first bullet here, foods that are high in fiber. So, fiber, as a definition, has to come from plants. So, things like fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds, beans, and whole grains. Fiber is important for the proper elimination of waste in our body. So, it helps keep us regular, it keeps things moving through the gut, and that can help keep the gut really healthy. Fiber is represented, as you'll see throughout these slides, through a variety of color.
So, some other foods we should consider introducing more of are foods that contain probiotics. So, these are foods that help introduce more of those healthy bacteria into our guts. So, examples are yogurt, sauerkraut, and apple cider vinegar. Non-dairy options for yogurt do exist, and whether you're choosing a non-dairy yogurt or a dairy yogurt, you really want to look for the ones that have the least amount of added sugar. So plain yogurt is usually the best bet, but if you do like a flavored yogurt, do look for the ones with as close to 0 grams of added sugar. And you can take a look at our grocery store tour video when you get a chance, and we go into a little bit more detail on finding those healthy yogurts. Apple cider vinegar is a great pantry staple for making dressings and salsas. And in addition to fiber, certain foods like asparagus, garlic, and bananas are considered prebiotic foods. These are foods that contain specific types of fiber that actually act as fertilizer for those healthy gut bacteria.
Yeah, as I look through your list, I just think color, color, color. There's apples, leeks, asparagus, bananas, jicama, like a lot of different colors are represented there. And so I just want to draw attention to the fact that colorful foods, they're not only containing antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds, but they also have what's called polyphenols that you can see listed. Polyphenols are a type of plant chemical that the gut microbes happen to love. Gut bacteria feed on polyphenols and produce really beneficial substances.
I think in almost every video we talk about eating colors, so hopefully that message is coming clear. Okay, so let's talk about some things that you may want to consider limiting or avoiding for your gut health. Added sugar. There's no clear guidelines on how much added sugar is too much for gut health, but you may want to consider limiting it to 25 grams or less a day of those added sugars. Red meat, you want to limit to 1 to 2 servings a week or 6 ounces or less for your gut health. Artificial sweeteners, this is an area we need more research on, but use these in moderation, if at all, for your gut health. Definitely want to limit those processed foods like fast foods and things that come in packages. And then alcohol. We talked about how alcohol can impact our healthy gut bacteria and also reduce our absorption of nutrients. So men should limit this to 2 drinks or less a day, and women should limit alcohol to 1 drink or less per day. Okay, well, I want to thank you, Emily, and thank you, everyone who has watched this video. We love sharing this information, and we hope it's valuable to you.
Thank you.